Hello and welcome to my patch notes rundown for the 16th of August. This week's update introduces the long-awaited nerf to Greater Ricochet, coupled with several other buffs and nerfs. We also received some decent quality of life additions like extra action bar presets and the ability to teleport out of certain bosses that previously prevented players from doing so. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Added 2 free action bar presets for members, bringing the total now to 15. This is a great expansion since with time players have developed more dedicated bars and revolution bars for various activities, and having more action bars makes this less restrictive to try new content. Action bar presets can now be named in the action bar settings. Players can now save which action bars are displayed with custom interface layouts. I highly recommend saving your preset with the action bars you currently have on screen, using the instructions on this video right now, since after the update all your saved layouts will have defaulted to not show any additional action bars. Rename the action bars to main action bar and additional action bar followed by the respective number. Added more descriptive text to various options within the action bar binding settings. Adding clarity to a lot of these vague and confusing settings through elaborated descriptions and tooltips are always positively welcomed. Teleport restrictions have been removed from the following boss encounters: Virago, Solak, Next Angel of Death, Rise of the Six, Araxor, and the Liberation of Mazcab raid. You no longer have to purposely die or stall to the point of a boss fight to lobby when a teammate dies or makes a mistake. This is an amazing change considering the cost of deaths and supplies. The teleport restriction remains for Telos due to the nature of the loot streaking system. Further continuing the game balancing changes. Smoke and Shadow Blitz spells now scale to tier 92 damage, up from tier 80. This brings them in line with Blood and Ice Blitz spells, which were already at tier 92. All surge spells now scale to tier 99 damage, up from tier 92. All barrage spells now scale to tier 99 damage, up from tier 92. And all Aurora spells now scale to tier 99 damage, also up from tier 92. Increase the radius range of the Ruby Aurora effect from 2 tiles to 5 tiles. Ruby Aurora has been buffed several times to the point where it has the potential to tip into becoming meta, depending on future group bosses. It has a 10% chance to proc with Lightform on, and it gives everyone within an 11 by 11 area a 1% damage boost that lasts 24 seconds, and this can stack up to 3 times for a total 3% damage. Spell tooltips now state what damage tier they scale up to. Greater Concentrated Blast damage has been reduced from 72.6 to 290.7% ability damage, down to 53.4 to 267% ability damage. This was a 11.8% decrease in damage. I think this is solid fine tuning. Even though on release this ability wasn't powerful enough to make magic compete with melee and ranged, it was too good within the magic style, making an already good ability overly dominant, which in my opinion is unhealthy in the same sense as Greater Ricochet was overly dominant within the ranged style. Greater Ricochet damage while using Corroming 4 has been reduced from 80 to 400% ability damage down to 60 to 260% ability damage. It finally happened. After waiting in anticipation of a nerf for over 8 months, Greater Ricochet has been nerfed. They nerfed it by reducing the damage dealt by additional corroming hits from 10 to 50% down to 5 to 15%. Anyone using Greater Ricochet will also very likely have the appropriate corroming perk, so this nerf results in a 33.3% decrease in damage. Even though it's not significant, it's important to note that this does not include the fact that split soul hits through the Eldritch Crossbow special attack will be less diminishing since the corroming ricochet damage will be even smaller. This also doesn't include how they change Ruby Bolts to work with the additional hits, which we'll talk about later. It's kinda bittersweet since you won't be doing ridiculous damage anymore, but ultimately I think this was definitely a good nerf. It's still extremely powerful, likely keeping range at the top of the food chain while also retaining its synergy with reactive bolt procs. The only major criticism is that it was unacceptably late. I'm not suggesting it was too late to change because I don't believe it's ever too late to make a good change, but for how absurdly broken it was, it shouldn't have taken this long to nerf. Enchanted Ruby Bolts will no longer scale their damage down when triggered by the additional hits of Greater Ricochet. Now, when your Ruby Bolts proc an additional Ricochet hit, it will hit for the full amount, which is a buff and an easy way to proc your Ruby Bolts effectively. However, I'm pretty certain it's still better to use Hydrix Bolts when using Greater Ricochet, for the simple nature that Hydrix Bolt can proc on every hit of Greater Ricochet, whereas Ruby Bolts is limited to only one due to its cooldown. Restore the ability for auto attack critical hits to fire off extra auto attack casts. This means that your auto attacks can chain further auto attack casts assuming they crit. Extra auto attack casts can now only fire off if the critical hit is on the player's main target. This prevents players from having a high chance of causing an overpowered amount of auto attacks to chain from AoE barraging multiple targets. Fix an issue where the extra auto attack cast from the staff was doing offhand damage if you were using dual wield weapons. These changes are definitely a step in the right direction, but I don't think they're good enough to give Magic the boost it needs. Potential changes to buff the staff are to lower the adrenaline cost of the special attack, or maybe making the extra auto attack cast a set damage, rather than depend on weapon type and spell damage. One quality of life change that I would definitely want to see implemented is to make the extra auto attack casts free of charge and not use any runes. And that's it for this week's patch notes. This was a hefty and spicy update. Even though there were a lot of changes, I'm almost certain the playstyles and metas pretty much remain the same, so you don't have to worry. I apologize for the delayed upload. I just wanted to make sure that the data and conclusions that I had were foolproof. Anyways, that's it from me. Thank you for watching and take care.